Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil offers a profound exploration of the motivations driving human thought and behavior, especially through the lens of philosophy. As readers and thinkers, we often engage with philosophical works under the assumption that they provide a pathway to truth. But what if, as Nietzsche provocatively suggests, every philosopher's work is nothing more than a reflection of their own personal biases and unconscious desires? What does this mean for our understanding of philosophy and for how we perceive our own motives and values? In the first part of Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche confronts us with the unsettling idea that philosophers are not impartial seekers of truth, but rather complex human beings whose beliefs are shaped by their own hidden agendas, psychological inclinations, and cultural conditioning. He argues that philosophy is essentially an unconscious autobiography, meaning that what a philosopher claims to be a rational inquiry into truth is often a veiled confession of their inner life and moral vision. This concept challenges the notion of pure objectivity and forces us to ask difficult questions about the foundations of human knowledge. Are we ever truly free of our biases? Or are we always trapped within the subjective limits of our own experiences? This radical rethinking of philosophy as a deeply personal pursuit, rather than a detached quest for objective truth, invites us to reflect on our own lives. Consider, for example, how often we approach conversations, arguments, or debates with the intent to assert our pre-existing beliefs rather than genuinely seeking new insights. Nietzsche compels us to see this tendency in the great philosophers as well. Even the most celebrated thinkers are ultimately products of their time, culture, and temperament. When we understand this, we start to see philosophy not as a series of cold, hard truths, but as a living dialogue shaped by human desires, fears, and aspirations. At its core, Nietzsche's critique of philosophy, and indeed, of human motivations, raises a pressing question. Can we ever act authentically? Authenticity, in Nietzschean terms, is not merely living according to socially accepted norms or the expectations of others. It involves a relentless questioning of values, a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, and the courage to create our own path in a world often dominated by convention and conformity. In this sense, Nietzsche challenges us not to settle for easy answers or adopt convenient moral positions, but to dig deeper and grapple with the messy, contradictory nature of human existence. One of Nietzsche's most memorable insights in Beyond Good and Evil is that human beings are guided by a will to power rather than a simple desire for knowledge or truth. This assertion reframes the way we think about our motivations. Traditionally, we like to believe that we seek knowledge out of a pure and noble impulse, that we strive to understand the world for its own sake. But Nietzsche insists that knowledge is often wielded as a tool for power, domination, and self-affirmation. When we uncover this underlying drive, we can no longer view the pursuit of knowledge in purely altruistic or rational terms. Instead, we must acknowledge the darker, more primal forces at work within us. This perspective on the will to power offers a stark contrast to the Enlightenment ideal of rationality as the supreme guide to human behavior. Nietzsche argues that rationality is often just a facade, a convenient cover for our deeper, more irrational impulses. Philosophers, in particular, are not immune to this. Their lofty theories and elaborate systems of thought often conceal a struggle for dominance over competing ideas and worldviews. In Nietzsche's eyes, every philosophical argument carries with it a hidden agenda, an implicit claim to superiority, and a desire to impose a particular vision of reality. To illustrate this point, consider the example of a philosopher who passionately argues for a particular moral or political system. On the surface, their arguments may appear to be grounded in reason, logic, and evidence, but beneath the surface lies a complex web of personal experiences, emotional attachments, and unspoken desires. Perhaps they are driven by a need for recognition, a fear of chaos, or a longing for stability. By exposing these hidden motivations, Nietzsche invites us to see philosophy as a human endeavor, shaped by the same forces that drive all human behavior. This realization can be unsettling, It forces us to confront the possibility that our deepest beliefs may not be as objective or rational as we like to think. Yet, at the same time, it opens up new possibilities for self-awareness and growth. By recognizing the influence of our own desires and biases, we can begin to question them, challenge them, and, ultimately, transcend them. This process is not easy, but it is essential for anyone who wishes to live authentically and engage with the world on a deeper level. Nietzsche's reflections on philosophy also have broader implications for how we understand human society and culture. Just as individuals are shaped by their personal experiences and desires, so too are cultures shaped by their collective values, beliefs, and aspirations. Nietzsche sees culture as a dynamic, ever-changing entity, constantly in flux as different values and ideas compete for dominance. This view challenges the notion of fixed, universal moral truths and suggests that values are always contingent, always subject to change. In many ways, Nietzsche's philosophy anticipates the debates that would later emerge in the 20th century around issues of power, identity, and cultural relativism. His insights into the role of power in shaping human beliefs resonate with modern discussions about the influence of social, political, and economic structures on our perceptions of truth. By exposing the hidden power dynamics at play in human thought, Nietzsche invites us to question the status quo and seek out new ways of understanding ourselves and the world around us. But Nietzsche's philosophy is not merely a critique of existing values. It is also a call to action. He challenges us to create our own values, to become the authors of our own lives. This is a daunting task, but it is also an exhilarating one. It requires us to break free from the constraints of tradition and convention, to confront our deepest fears and desires, and to embrace the uncertainty and complexity of life. In doing so, we can begin to forge a path that is uniquely our own, a path that reflects our true selves, rather than the expectations of others. As we explore these themes, we are reminded of the power and potential of human creativity and resilience. Nietzsche's vision is ultimately one of empowerment. By confronting the limitations of traditional values and recognizing the role of power in shaping our beliefs, we can begin to take control of our own destinies. We can become creators of meaning, rather than passive recipients of inherited norms. This is the challenge that Nietzsche presents to us in Beyond Good and Evil, and it is one that remains as relevant today as it was when he first wrote it. So, as we delve deeper into Nietzsche's philosophy, let us keep in mind the questions he raises about authenticity, power, and the nature of human motivation. Let us reflect on the ways in which our own beliefs are shaped by hidden desires and unconscious biases. And, most importantly, let us strive to live authentically, to create our own values, and to engage with the world on our own terms. This is the true legacy of Nietzsche's thought, and it is a challenge that each of us must confront in our own way. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in Aachen, Prussia, and grew up to become one of the most influential and controversial philosophers of the 19th century. His intellectual journey spanned an era marked by rapid social change, industrialization, and deepening questions about traditional values and religion. By the time Nietzsche was formulating his major works, Europe was grappling with the legacy of Enlightenment rationalism, the rise of secularism, and the challenges posed by scientific advancements. These changes provoked a crisis of meaning for many, and Nietzsche's philosophy emerged as a radical response to this turmoil. Nietzsche's own life was marked by struggle, including severe health issues that plagued him throughout his career. By his early 30s, he was forced to resign from his position as a professor of philology due to deteriorating health, which left him largely isolated. This solitude, however, became fertile ground for his most profound philosophical explorations. Living on the margins of society, Nietzsche devoted himself to a relentless critique of the foundations of Western thought, including Christianity, morality, and conventional philosophical assumptions. He saw these traditions as increasingly unable to address the existential crises facing modern humanity. Nietzsche's work can be characterized by a deep skepticism toward established moral and cultural norms. He famously declared that God is dead, a provocative statement that underscored the decline of religious authority and the moral systems traditionally derived from it. For Nietzsche, this death of God symbolized a cultural shift that demanded a revaluation of values, a reassessment of the guiding principles of life, society, and meaning. It was within this context that he wrote Beyond Good and Evil, published in 1886. Beyond Good and Evil is a critical extension of the ideas Nietzsche first introduced in his earlier work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. In Beyond Good and Evil, he sets out to expose what he saw as the fundamental flaws of traditional morality and to challenge the dogmatic adherence to so-called universal truths. The book's title itself suggests a movement beyond simplistic binaries of good and evil that had dominated Western thought for centuries. Nietzsche saw these moral categories as restrictive, rooted in religious doctrines and outdated philosophical assumptions that no longer served the evolving needs of humanity. One of Nietzsche's central concerns in Beyond Good and Evil is the nature and origin of value systems. He believed that values are not objective truths handed down from on high, but rather constructs shaped by human needs, desires, and power dynamics. In this work, he examines how value systems emerge, how they are enforced, and how they reflect the interests and psychology of those who create them. Nietzsche's approach was both radical and deeply unsettling to many of his contemporaries, as it called into question the legitimacy of moral codes and the motivations behind them. Nietzsche's critique extended to philosophers themselves, whom he viewed as deeply influenced by their own hidden biases and psychological drives. He argued that what philosophers present as rational, objective thought is often an expression of their personal will to power, their desire to impose their values on the world. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche pulls back the curtain on this process, revealing that even the loftiest philosophical ideas are shaped by very human, often unacknowledged, motivations. This insight, he believed, was essential for understanding the true nature of human thought and behavior. At its core, Beyond Good and Evil is an invitation to rethink morality and to question the assumptions that underpin our beliefs. Nietzsche sought to free humanity from the constraints of dogmatic thinking, urging individuals to create their own values and live authentically. This radical revaluation of values was not merely an intellectual exercise. For Nietzsche, it was a necessary step in confronting the moral and existential crises of his time. The historical backdrop of Nietzsche's work is crucial to understanding his philosophy. The late 19th century was a period of profound social, scientific, and cultural transformation. Darwin's theory of evolution, for example, had upended traditional views of humanity's place in the world, while rapid industrialization was reshaping societies in ways that often left individuals alienated and adrift. Nietzsche saw these shifts as both a challenge and an opportunity. He believed that, with the decline of traditional religious and moral structures, humanity faced the terrifying yet exhilarating prospect of creating its own values and meaning. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche grapples with this challenge head-on, offering a vision of life that emphasizes strength, creativity, and self-overcoming. He calls on individuals to embrace their own will to power, not as a quest for domination over others, but as a drive to shape their lives according to their own values and aspirations. For Nietzsche, this was the essence of what it meant to live authentically and fully in a world where old certainties had crumbled. Through Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche's influence would extend far beyond his own time, shaping existentialism, postmodernism, and numerous other philosophical movements. His exploration of value systems, morality, and human motivation continues to resonate, challenging us to confront the biases that shape our beliefs and to ask, as he did, what values truly guide our lives, and are they worthy of our commitment? This, perhaps, is the enduring power of Nietzsche's work, a call to question, to create, and to live with unflinching honesty in the face of an uncertain world. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche's assertion that every philosopher's work is, at its core, an unconscious autobiography is a powerful critique of the assumptions underpinning traditional philosophy. Rather than viewing philosophical inquiry as a detached and purely objective pursuit of truth, Nietzsche argues that it is deeply entwined with the personal motives, desires, and psychological constitution of the philosopher. In this view, the seemingly impersonal search for truth is, in reality, a veiled self-revelation, a process in which the philosopher's inner life, values, and cultural influences shape every argument and idea they put forth. Nietzsche's concept of philosophy as an unconscious autobiography reflects his broader critique of human motivations and self-perception. He believed that our conscious motives are often just the surface of a much deeper sea of unconscious drives and desires. Philosophers, despite their lofty claims to rationality and objectivity, are not immune to this reality. In fact, their works are often a more elaborate, sophisticated manifestation of the same forces that drive everyday human behavior. Just as a novelist might unconsciously embed elements of their own life into a story, philosophers reveal their own values, biases, and struggles through their theories and arguments. For Nietzsche, understanding philosophy requires peeling back these layers of conscious intention to reveal the personal and cultural influences at play. Consider the historical context in which Nietzsche was writing. The 19th century was a time when philosophers often sought to construct grand systems of thought that claimed to explain the nature of reality, morality, and human existence. Yet Nietzsche saw these systems as deeply flawed, not because they were logically inconsistent, but because they were driven by unexamined motives and cultural biases. For example, he viewed the Christian-influenced moral philosophy of his contemporaries as a reflection of deep-seated ressentiment, a term Nietzsche used to describe a repressed form of resentment and envy, and a desire to impose moral control over others. In this sense, the moral philosophies of the time were not merely attempts to define right and wrong. They were also tools for social power and control, rooted in the psychological needs of their creators. This leads to one of Nietzsche's most famous and controversial ideas, the will to power. Unlike the traditional Enlightenment view that human beings are guided by reason or a pure desire for knowledge, Nietzsche argues that our actions, beliefs, and values are fundamentally driven by a will to power, the desire to assert and enhance our own existence, influence, and mastery over ourselves and the world. For Nietzsche, the will to power is not necessarily about dominating others. Rather, it is a fundamental drive that shapes all aspects of life, from individual self-overcoming to cultural and artistic creation. The idea that humans are guided by a will to power rather than pure rationality or a disinterested pursuit of knowledge is central to Nietzsche's critique of traditional morality and philosophy. When we examine the motivations behind our beliefs, we often find that what we claim to be seeking, whether it is truth, goodness, or justice, is deeply entwined with our own desires for affirmation, control, or recognition. This does not make our pursuits inherently illegitimate, but it does challenge the notion that they are purely rational or objective. By exposing this reality, Nietzsche invites us to confront our own motivations honestly and to question the values we claim to hold. To illustrate this idea, consider the example of political ideologies. Many political movements throughout history have presented themselves as rational systems aimed at achieving justice, equality, or freedom. Yet, as Nietzsche would argue, these movements are often driven by deeper, less acknowledged motives, such as the desire for power, revenge against perceived injustices, or the need to impose a particular vision of society. The French Revolution, for instance, began with ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, but it quickly devolved into a struggle for power, culminating in the Reign of Terror. Nietzsche would likely interpret this as a manifestation of the will to power at work, masked by the language of reason and moral idealism, but ultimately driven by deeper, more visceral human desires. Nietzsche's critique also applies on a more personal level. Imagine a person who devotes their life to charitable work, ostensibly motivated by a desire to help others. Nietzsche would not dismiss this motivation as insincere, but he would encourage us to examine the underlying drives at play. Is the person driven by genuine compassion? Or is their altruism a way to gain social recognition, assuage guilt, or achieve a sense of superiority over others? The answer may be complex, involving a mix of conscious and unconscious motives. For Nietzsche, acknowledging these motivations does not necessarily diminish the value of the person's actions, but it does offer a more honest, nuanced view of human behavior. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche extends this analysis to philosophers themselves, whom he views as no different from other human beings in their susceptibility to the will to power. When a philosopher constructs a grand system of thought, they are not merely seeking to describe reality, they are also seeking to impose their vision of reality on others. This process is often driven by the philosopher's own psychological needs and cultural context. Nietzsche's critique forces us to question whether any philosophical system can truly claim to be objective, or whether it is always, to some degree, a reflection of its creator's personal will to power. Nietzsche's insights into human motivation also have important implications for how we understand culture and society. Just as individuals are shaped by their unconscious drives, so too are cultural norms and values shaped by the collective will to power of those who create and enforce them. This perspective challenges the idea that moral and cultural values are fixed or universal. Instead, Nietzsche sees them as contingent, subject to change, and often reflective of the interests and power dynamics of specific groups or individuals. To illustrate this point, consider the evolution of societal norms around gender and sexuality. For much of history, patriarchal values dominated many cultures, shaping laws, traditions, and moral codes in ways that favored men over women. Nietzsche would argue that these norms were not the product of a disinterested pursuit of justice or truth. Rather, they reflected the will to power of those in positions of dominance. As social and cultural dynamics have shifted, so too have these norms, revealing their contingent and power-driven nature. Ultimately, Nietzsche's analysis of human motivation and the will to power challenges us to confront the complexities of our own beliefs and values. It asks us to look beyond the surface of our conscious motives and to grapple with the deeper, often conflicting drives that shape our lives. By doing so, we can move toward a more honest and authentic engagement with ourselves and the world, a process that Nietzsche saw as essential for true self-overcoming and the creation of new values. In this way, Beyond Good and Evil remains a powerful and provocative call to question the foundations of our beliefs and to embrace the complexity and potential of human existence. Viewing philosophy as a revelation of personal and cultural biases, as Nietzsche suggests in Beyond Good and Evil, has far-reaching implications for how we understand human thought and the pursuit of knowledge. By challenging the idea that philosophy is a purely rational, objective endeavor, Nietzsche compels us to reconsider the motivations behind every philosophical system, argument, and belief. This perspective undermines the Enlightenment ideal of detached, universal reason and exposes the ways in which cultural, psychological, and historical factors shape human thought. In Nietzsche's view, philosophy is not just about abstract principles or truths, it is about the lived experiences, desires, and struggles of those who create and engage with it. One major implication of this view is that no philosophical system can claim absolute objectivity or truth. Every system reflects the biases and motivations of its creator, making philosophy a deeply subjective pursuit. This challenges traditional notions of authority and legitimacy in philosophical discourse, encouraging a more skeptical and critical approach to established doctrines. If we accept that every philosophy is shaped by the personal and cultural context of its author, then we must also accept that no single system of thought can be considered definitive or final. Instead, philosophy becomes a dynamic and ongoing dialogue, a process of negotiation and self-exploration that is always contingent and open to revision. Nietzsche's critique of philosophy as an unconscious autobiography also anticipates later philosophical movements that sought to deconstruct established norms and reveal hidden power dynamics. For instance, existentialism, which emerged in the early 20th century, built on Nietzsche's emphasis on individual authenticity, freedom, and the rejection of imposed values. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir explored themes of personal responsibility, self-creation, and the rejection of externally imposed moral codes. echoing Nietzsche's call to question traditional values and create one's own meaning in life. By emphasizing the subjective and contingent nature of human existence, existentialism carried forward Nietzsche's critique of universal moral systems and objective truths. Nietzsche's influence is perhaps even more evident in the development of deconstruction, a philosophical movement associated with thinkers like Jacques Derrida. Deconstruction seeks to expose the hidden assumptions, contradictions, and power structures embedded within texts, language, and cultural practices. Like Nietzsche, deconstructionists challenge the idea that meaning is fixed or stable, arguing instead that it is constantly shifting and shaped by context, history, and power dynamics. Derrida's assertion that texts can never fully escape their own biases and contradictions owes much to Nietzsche's insight that philosophy is shaped by the unconscious motives of its creators. Both thinkers share a commitment to uncovering the hidden forces that shape human thought and to questioning the legitimacy of established norms and structures. However, viewing philosophy as a reflection of personal and cultural biases is not without its complexities and potential shortcomings. One criticism of Nietzsche's approach is that it risks undermining the very possibility of meaningful philosophical inquiry. If every philosophy is simply a reflection of its creator's biases, then how can we hope to engage in a productive search for truth or understanding? This skepticism can lead to a form of relativism in which all beliefs are seen as equally valid or equally flawed because they are all rooted in subjective biases. Critics argue that this relativism can be paralyzing, leaving us with no clear basis for evaluating or comparing different philosophical systems. Nietzsche himself was aware of this potential problem, and his work reflects an ongoing struggle to balance his critique of traditional values with a vision of what might replace them. He did not advocate for a nihilistic rejection of all values, but instead called for a revaluation of values, a process in which individuals take responsibility for creating their own values and meaning. This approach is both empowering and daunting, as it places the burden of value creation squarely on the individual. It also raises the question of whether such a process can ever be truly free from bias, or whether it simply replaces one set of biases with another. Another potential shortcoming of Nietzsche's philosophy is its emphasis on the will to power as the fundamental drive behind human behavior. While this concept offers a compelling explanation for many aspects of human motivation, it has been criticized for being overly reductive. Critics argue that reducing all human behavior to a single drive risks oversimplifying the complexity and diversity of human experience. Not all actions, beliefs, or values can be easily explained in terms of power dynamics, and there is a danger in elevating the will to power to a universal explanatory principle. Such a move can lead to cynicism and a tendency to view all human interactions as fundamentally manipulative or self-serving. Despite these potential shortcomings, Nietzsche's philosophy remains a powerful and provocative lens through which to view human thought and culture. His emphasis on questioning established norms, exposing hidden biases, and confronting uncomfortable truths continues to resonate with contemporary readers. In a world that often seeks easy answers and fixed categories, Nietzsche's willingness to embrace ambiguity, complexity, and contradiction offers a valuable alternative. His work reminds us that philosophy is not about achieving certainty or finality, but about engaging in a continuous process of self-examination, critique, and growth. Moreover, Nietzsche's critique of traditional values and his call to create one's own values speak to the ongoing struggle for authenticity and self-determination in modern life. In an era characterized by rapid social change, political polarization, and cultural fragmentation, Nietzsche's insights into the role of power, desire, and bias in shaping human beliefs are more relevant than ever. By encouraging us to confront our own biases and to question the values we inherit, Nietzsche invites us to take responsibility for our own lives and to create meaning in a world that often seems devoid of it. In this sense, Nietzsche's philosophy is both a critique and a call to action, a reminder that the search for truth, meaning, and authenticity is an inherently personal and often messy endeavor. It requires us to confront the limits of our own knowledge, to question the motives behind our beliefs, and to engage with the world in a way that is both critical and creative. While this process may never lead to a final or definitive answer, it is, for Nietzsche, the essence of what it means to be human. To illustrate Nietzsche's themes of grappling with identity, personal motivation, and the influence of ideological beliefs, we can turn to both historical and contemporary examples that reveal the complexities of human behavior and societal norms. Nietzsche's philosophy is deeply relevant to modern issues in politics, culture, and ethics, and exploring these connections makes his work more accessible and engaging. Consider the story of Mahatma Gandhi, whose philosophy of nonviolence and civil disobedience shaped the struggle for India's independence from British rule. On the surface, Gandhi's commitment to peace and justice may appear to contrast with Nietzsche's emphasis on the will to power. However, a closer look reveals a Nietzschean dimension to Gandhi's struggle. Gandhi's nonviolent resistance was not simply a passive rejection of oppression. It was a powerful assertion of agency and self-mastery. By refusing to meet violence with violence, Gandhi exerted a kind of moral power that challenged and ultimately destabilized the British colonial authority. In this sense, Gandhi exemplified Nietzsche's idea that the will to power is not necessarily about domination over others, but can also manifest as an inner strength and determination to live according to one's values. On a more individual level, consider the story of Malcolm X, who underwent a profound transformation during his life. From his early years as a street hustler to his later role as a prominent civil rights leader and advocate for Black empowerment, Malcolm X's journey reflects Nietzsche's themes of self-overcoming and the creation of new values. Throughout his life, Malcolm X rejected the values imposed upon him by a racist society and sought to define his own identity and purpose. His willingness to question his beliefs, even at great personal risk, and to reinvent himself in response to new experiences demonstrates the kind of radical self-examination and authenticity that Nietzsche championed. By the end of his life, Malcolm X had moved beyond simplistic binaries of good and evil and embraced a more complex, nuanced understanding of justice and human dignity. In contemporary culture, we can see Nietzsche's influence in the ongoing debate over identity politics. Many individuals and groups today are grappling with questions of identity, belonging, and power in ways that echo Nietzsche's critique of traditional values and his call for self-creation. The rise of movements advocating for racial, gender, and sexual equality reflects a rejection of historically imposed norms and a demand for new ways of understanding and organizing human relationships. Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to consider the motivations behind these movements and to ask difficult questions about the power dynamics at play. Are these movements purely about justice and equality, or do they also reflect deeper desires for recognition, agency, and self-definition? Nietzsche would likely argue that both motives are present, and understanding this complexity is essential for meaningful engagement with social change. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power also sheds light on modern political dynamics. Consider the rise of populist leaders who promise to overthrow established elites and return power to the people. These leaders often position themselves as challengers to the status quo, tapping into the resentment and frustrations of their supporters. Nietzsche would recognize in this dynamic the workings of the will to power, an attempt to reshape the political order in accordance with the leader's vision and the desires of their base. At the same time, Nietzsche's critique of moral and ideological dogma reminds us to be wary of simplistic narratives and to question whether these movements truly serve the common good or merely reflect the personal ambitions of those in power. In the realm of ethics, Nietzsche's philosophy invites us to examine our own values and the motivations behind them. Consider the debate over climate change and environmental ethics. Many individuals and organizations advocate for sustainable practices and policies to protect the planet, often framing their arguments in moral terms. Nietzsche would encourage us to look beyond the surface rhetoric and consider the deeper motivations at play. Are we driven purely by a desire to save the planet? Or are there other motives, such as fear of loss, a desire for control, or the need to assert moral superiority, that influence our actions? By exposing these motivations, Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to engage more honestly with the complexities of ethical decision-making and to take responsibility for our own values. Another modern application of Nietzsche's ideas can be found in the realm of technology and social media. The rise of social media platforms has transformed the way we interact with others and present ourselves to the world. In many ways, social media can be seen as a manifestation of the will to power, a platform for individuals to assert their identity, influence others, and gain recognition. However, Nietzsche would also warn of the dangers of conformity and the loss of authenticity in this digital age. The pressure to conform to popular trends and the constant pursuit of likes and validation can lead to a kind of herd mentality that Nietzsche critiqued in his writings. To live authentically in this context requires a willingness to question the values promoted by social media culture and to create one's own path, free from external pressures. In literature and art, Nietzsche's influence is evident in works that explore themes of identity, power, and self-creation. Consider the novels of Franz Kafka, which often depict characters struggling against oppressive systems and trying to assert their own identity in a world that seeks to define them. Kafka's protagonists, such as Joseph K. in The Trial, grapple with the absurdity and power dynamics of their circumstances, reflecting Nietzsche's critique of societal norms and the struggle for self-determination. Similarly, modern films and television series that explore antiheroes and morally ambiguous characters often reflect Nietzschean themes, challenging viewers to question traditional notions of good and evil and to empathize with complex, flawed individuals. Through these examples, we see that Nietzsche's philosophy is not an abstract exercise, but a lens through which we can understand the complexities of human behavior, culture, and society. His emphasis on self-creation, the will to power, and the critique of traditional values continues to resonate in contemporary debates over identity, ethics, and politics. By engaging with Nietzsche's ideas, we are challenged to confront our own motivations, question the values we inherit, and take responsibility for creating our own meaning in a rapidly changing world. This is the power and relevance of Nietzsche's thought, a call to live authentically, to embrace complexity, and to navigate the ever-shifting landscape of human existence with courage and integrity. Reflecting on the significance of Nietzsche's work, I am struck by how deeply it challenges our understanding of morality, human motivations, and the narratives we construct around our lives. Nietzsche's philosophy compels us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we inhabit. He strips away the comforting veneer of objective morality, exposing the deeply human and often messy motivations that underlie our values, beliefs, and actions. In doing so, Nietzsche invites us to engage in a process of radical self-examination, asking not just what we believe, but why we believe it and who benefits from those beliefs. One of the most powerful aspects of Nietzsche's thought is his rejection of the idea that morality is a fixed, universal code handed down from some transcendent authority. Instead, he views moral values as human creations, shaped by historical, cultural, and psychological forces. This perspective can be both liberating and terrifying. On one hand, it frees us from the constraints of dogmatic moral systems, allowing us to create and live according to our own values. On the other hand, it places an immense responsibility on each of us to define what we stand for and to live with integrity and authenticity. Personally, Nietzsche's critique of traditional values resonates deeply in our current era, where social, political, and ethical norms are constantly being questioned and redefined. His call to revalue all values, to question everything we take for granted, encourages a kind of intellectual courage that is rare and difficult to sustain. It is far easier to conform to established norms or to adopt the values of the herd than to strike out on our own path. Yet Nietzsche reminds us that true authenticity requires a willingness to confront the uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity of life. The idea that our motivations are often driven by a will to power rather than pure reason or disinterested morality challenges us to look inward and examine our own actions and beliefs. How often do we act out of a desire for recognition, influence, or control, even if we convince ourselves that our motives are altruistic or noble? Nietzsche's insights force us to acknowledge the darker, more self-interested aspects of our nature without succumbing to cynicism. Instead of denying or suppressing these drives, we can seek to understand and channel them in ways that promote growth, creativity, and meaningful engagement with the world. As I grapple with Nietzsche's ideas, I find myself asking, what values guide my life? Are they truly my own, or are they inherited from my culture, family, or social environment? To what extent are my beliefs shaped by unconscious desires and biases that I have not fully confronted? These questions are not easy to answer, and they often lead to more uncertainty rather than clarity. But Nietzsche would argue that this is precisely the point. To live authentically is to embrace the struggle of self-exploration, to challenge our own assumptions, and to resist the temptation to settle for easy answers or comforting illusions. Nietzsche's philosophy also prompts us to reflect on how we engage with others and with society as a whole. If every individual is driven by their own unique will to power, how can we coexist in a world of competing desires and values? How do we balance our need for self-expression and self-creation with the demands of community and cooperation? These questions remain as relevant today as they were in Nietzsche's time, as we navigate complex social, political, and ethical challenges that require us to reconcile our individual desires with the needs of the collective. Ultimately, Nietzsche's work is not about prescribing a specific moral code or philosophy of life. It is about challenging us to become the authors of our own values and to take responsibility for the kind of life we create. This is both an exhilarating and daunting task, but it is one that lies at the heart of what it means to be human, in a world that often seems dominated by noise, conformity, and shallow pursuits. Nietzsche's call to live with courage, authenticity, and self-awareness remains as vital as ever. As you reflect on Nietzsche's philosophy, I invite you to consider the following questions. What values do you hold most dear, and why? Are they truly your own, or are they shaped by the expectations of others? How do your actions reflect or contradict the values you claim to hold? And, perhaps most importantly, what kind of person do you want to become? Knowing that you have the power to create your own values and meaning in life, Nietzsche's challenge is not an easy one, but it is a call to engage deeply and honestly with ourselves and the world around us, a challenge that, if we take it seriously, can lead to profound transformation and self-discovery. In conclusion, Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil offers a transformative lens through which we can view philosophy, morality, and human motivation. By challenging the traditional notion of objective truth and exposing the biases and hidden desires that shape human thought, Nietzsche compels us to question everything we believe and hold sacred. His assertion that every philosopher's work is, at its core, an unconscious autobiography reveals that our deepest values and beliefs are often shaped by our personal experiences, cultural influences, and psychological drives. Far from being purely rational beings, we are motivated by a complex interplay of conscious and unconscious desires, a reality that Nietzsche captures with his concept of the will to power. The implications of Nietzsche's insights are vast and resonate deeply in contemporary life. We see his influence in movements that challenge traditional values and seek to redefine social norms, in political dynamics shaped by the desire for recognition and control, and in our own struggles to live authentically amidst the noise and conformity of modern society. By encouraging us to question inherited values, confront our biases, and take responsibility for creating our own meaning, Nietzsche offers both a critique of established norms and a call to action. His philosophy demands that we engage with ourselves and the world honestly, courageously, and creatively. As we grapple with Nietzsche's ideas, we are faced with difficult but important questions. How can we live authentically in a world that often demands conformity? To what extent are our beliefs and actions shaped by unconscious desires and biases? And how can we create values that truly reflect who we are and what we stand for? Nietzsche does not offer easy answers, but he challenges us to embark on a journey of self-exploration and self-creation, one that can lead to greater self-awareness, growth, and fulfillment. The relevance of Nietzsche's philosophy extends far beyond the confines of academic debate. It speaks to the core of what it means to be human in a complex, ever-changing world. It invites us to question, to challenge, and to create. As you reflect on the themes and questions raised by Nietzsche, consider this. What values will you choose to live by? And how will you shape the meaning and direction of your own life? This is the challenge and the promise of Nietzsche's philosophy, a call to engage deeply with ourselves and the world, to create our own values, and to live with authenticity and purpose.